Morgan Metz resided in Canton, a modest city in Cherokee County, Georgia. Alongside her 2 children, she was a mother, a businesswoman, an interior designer, and she had lately accomplished something very difficult. She had stepped away from a marriage that had shattered her in ways nearly everyone around her never realized. On New Year's Day 2021, during the early hours of the morning, a masked person clothed in all black forced into Morgan's home while she slept. Approximately 40 minutes later, her ex-husband appeared. He discovered her tied on the porch. He sliced her restraints. He embraced her while they awaited the police. He informed investigators that a stranger had tapped on his apartment window in the middle of the night and alerted him that Morgan was in danger. He was the worried ex-husband, the man who had hurried to her side, the hero. He was not. Morgan was 14 years old when she encountered Rodney Metzer at a baseball game. Rod was 17. He was self-assured and charismatic, and from the very first evening, he left an impression. Before the game was even over, he brought Morgan over to meet his mother, Kathy. He told her, "You're going to meet Morgan tonight. Be nice." For Morgan, it was immediate. She later described it as love at first sight, frightening in its speed and certainty, and Rod treated her in those early years as though there was nothing she could want that he would not find a way to give her. He called her his princess. They dated for 7 years before marrying in 2009. Morgan was 21. Rod was 24. Kathy Metzer, Rod's mother, would later say that Morgan was one of the most gorgeous brides she had ever seen. The ceremony was outdoors. The weather was perfect. By every account, it looked like the beginning of something beautiful. But before the marriage was even a year old, the family was struck by grief. Rod had a younger brother named Kevin. Kevin was 19 years old and had been battling leukemia. He died roughly 8 months after the wedding. Rod was devastated. His mother later said she didn't think he was ever the same after that. He became dependent on Morgan in a way he never had been before. Kathy said that in the weeks that followed, he barely left Morgan's side for more than an hour or 2. Morgan held him through it. She was his anchor. Then in 2011, the couple had a son of their own. They named him Kevin after Rod's brother. He was born premature and arrived with a congenital heart defect. He lived for 18 days. He died on April 2nd, 2011, what would have been his original due date. Morgan later described that period as a big blur with all the emotions. She and Rod had now lost 2 Kevins in the span of little more than a year. Roughly 3 months after the baby's death, Morgan discovered she was pregnant again. In 2012, twins were born, a daughter named Mills and a son named Mason. They arrived healthy, and for a period, life settled into something that resembled stability. Morgan said she saw her mirror image in Mills. She described Mason as the champion she needed. On the surface, the Metz family looked like a success story. Rod worked in sales and trading. Morgan was raising the children and growing increasingly passionate about home design and renovation. They had a house in Canton. They had 2 healthy kids. They had each other. What was happening beneath that surface was something else entirely. The first time Rod physically attacked Morgan, they were out on a boat with friends. It was a Labor Day weekend. The details of what provoked it were never made fully public, but what happened afterward was telling. Rod had no marks on him. Morgan did. By the time the night was over, Rod had convinced their friends and Morgan's own parents that she was the one who had been out of control. Friends stopped talking to her. She became isolated. And that isolation was not an accident. It was the beginning of a pattern that would define the next several years of her life. The abuse Morgan described was not a single explosive event. It was a slow and systematic dismantling. Rod would pick fights, then deny them. He would accuse her of things she had not done. He would make her feel as though her own memory could not be trusted. Once when they argued, he deliberately rolled down a flight of stairs and then turned to the children and said, "Look what Mommy did. Can you believe she pushed me?" He was using the children as instruments. He was rewriting reality in real time, and he was doing it in front of the people Morgan loved most. The sexual abuse was something Morgan only came to name later. At the time, she simply endured it. He was aggressive, she said, and he would not take no for an answer. It was years before she was able to recognize that for what it was. He also watched her. He installed surveillance in the home. He photographed her text messages when she left her phone unattended. He searched how to crack an iPhone password, and on at least one occasion, he took photos of her through the shower glass without her knowledge. Images she would not discover until police found them on his phone. The financial dynamics shifted during this period as well. Rod lost his job roughly a year after the twins were born. He moved into day trading, but it was unsuccessful. Morgan, meanwhile, had launched a home design and renovation company called Shiplap and Sugar, and it was thriving. She became the primary breadwinner. By 2020, she'd won a Reader's Choice Award for the business in Canton. She was building something. He was losing everything. And for a man who had made control the centerpiece of his identity, that combination was dangerous. Morgan afterward said, "The last 4 years of the marriage were like existing with a monster that constantly sought to tear me down and box me in." In 2020, she filed for divorce. The divorce was completed in December 2020. Morgan retained the family home in Canton. Rod relocated to his own apartment approximately 12 minutes away. They preserved what Morgan characterized as a friendly enough relationship for the sake of the twins, who were 8 years old and needed both their parents present. Morgan's best friend and business partner, Nicole Stabasevsky, noticed the change in Morgan after Rod relocated out. She afterwards said it was the first time she had witnessed Morgan have peace. Something had calmed within her. The person who had been gradually broken for years was starting to breathe again. Rod was not adapting nearly as well. He messaged Morgan persistently. He begged her to return. He told her he would earn enough money. He said she could leave her job right now. She refused repeatedly and consistently. She had reached her decision. Around Christmas Day 2020, Rod phoned Morgan with news. He told her he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was frightened. He said he needed her. He had documentation, a letter from a doctor, a hospital billing record. Morgan allowed him remain at the house. She slept in her bedroom. Rod slept on the sofa. She told herself it was the compassionate thing to do. He was the father of her children, and she believed he was dying. What she did not realize was that Rod had established a fake email account and used it to produce the cancer diagnosis letter himself. The hospital invoice was fabricated. The doctor did not exist, and while he remained in her home under the pretense of illness, Rod was not resting. He was working. He tampered with the basement window alarm sensor, removing it from the frame and placing both pieces side by side on the sill so the system would still read them as connected. When the window was later opened from outside, no alarm would sound. He photographed Morgan through the shower glass. He photographed her texts. He was planning something. On the 31st of December, Morgan had finally had enough. She told Rod he needed to tell his parents about the cancer diagnosis. He refused. She told him to leave. He did. But before he went, he slid a check under her porch. $56,000 made out to Morgan. He sent her a text. "You should have all the money. You deserve everything." She later realized the check would have bounced. There was nothing in his account. But the check achieved what Rod needed it to achieve. Morgan had told him she would be spending the night at her parents' house. But she went back to the house to retrieve the check, went inside, set the alarm, and went to bed. Rod spent New Year's Eve sending texts. "You need to get back with me." She stopped responding. It was just after midnight when she finally fell asleep. She did not know that Rod was already on his way. At approximately half midnight on the 1st of January 2021, Morgan woke to something in her bedroom doorway. A silhouette lit from behind, dressed head to toe in black, hoodie, trousers, gloves, a mask that angled upward at the top like Batman's, and he was standing completely still, fists clenched, rigid like he was ready. She screamed. She later said it was the most painful sound she had ever made. He charged at her. He jumped on top of her and began pistol whipping her with the butt of a handgun. He punched her. His voice was disguised deep and altered like Batman from the films, and he spoke to her. "You're going to regret this. You've done really wrong now." Then he said something that changed everything. "You messed up. You're going to be fine. But we can't say that about your ex-husband. You're really going to miss him." Morgan responded carefully. "No, don't hurt my husband. I love him very much." And in that moment, she knew the reference to her ex-husband, the specific phrasing, the way this figure moved and stood and breathed. She knew who was behind the mask. She made a decision, and it was the right one. She did not let him know that she knew, because she had no idea what he would do if he realized she had recognized him. So she played along. She stayed still. She answered his questions. She survived. He strangled her twice. The first time brought her close to unconsciousness. The second time, she thought it was her last breath. She later described it as the worst feeling in the world. To believe in that moment that you are dying. He zip-tied her hands behind her back. The restraints had been prepared in advance. 2 zip ties interwoven and pre-looped. He sexually assaulted her. He demanded jewelry. He ripped through drawers. He took her phone, made her give him the passcode, used the home security app to unlock the back door remotely, and then deleted all camera footage from the cloud system. He placed a pillowcase over her head, and then he walked her naked, bound and hooded out to the back porch and left her lying face down in the cold. "Do not get up until you hear 2 car honks," he told her, "or I'll kill you." He left. The honks never came. Morgan lay motionless in the freezing air. She was injured. She was alone. She could not see and could not move her hands. She later said she was terrified that someone else might still be out there watching, so she stayed perfectly still. She tried to stay conscious, knowing that with head injuries, falling asleep could be the last thing she did. She listened to the sound of a nearby stream, and she waited. For roughly 40 minutes, she lay there alone. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. "Oh, honey, what happened?" Rod's voice. He cut her zip ties. He helped her up. He held her while she stood on the cold back porch, battered and bleeding, her eye already swelling shut from the pistol whipping. He called 911. "Somebody broke in over here." She was on the back porch. She was tied up with a hood over her head. Morgan later described watching him in those moments. His shock, she said, was not the shock of a man seeing his ex-wife beaten. It was the shock of a man seeing what he had just done to her. He was seated beside her when deputies arrived. He looked like a concerned family member. According to District Attorney Shannon Wallace, he told investigators he had been at his apartment getting ready for bed, brushing his teeth when someone knocked on his window and said Morgan's name in a threatening way. Worried, he had come straight to the house. He had no explanation for why he went to the house rather than her parents', where Morgan had told him she would be staying that night. Sergeant Dakota Livers arrived at the scene at around 3 in the morning. Rod was in his car with a deputy. When Livers confirmed who he was, Rod snapped at him. "Do your job." For a man who had supposedly just rescued his ex-wife from a horrifying attack, the hostility was striking. Livers filed it away. Morgan, speaking to investigators away from Rod, told them directly that she believed her ex-husband had been the one behind the mask. She had recognized the way he walked, the way he moved. Even through the disguise, she knew the body she was looking at. Sergeant Robert Hall confronted Rod at the scene that same night. He told Rod plainly, "There is no way in hell that someone knocks on your window and says her name, and you immediately come here, and she happens to be bound with a pillowcase over her head." Rod had no satisfying answer, but what happened next moved the case from suspicion to certainty far faster than anyone anticipated. When investigators asked Rod to hand over his phone, which he voluntarily did, they found a hidden folder. Inside, it were photographs Rod had taken of Morgan through the shower glass, without her knowledge, and screenshots of her private text conversations with another man. That was enough. Rod was arrested on New Year's Day itself, standing on Morgan's porch for invasion of privacy and giving false statements. The exchange was captured on her home security camera. "Ja, you didn't have that permission. Y'all don't have that relationship. God, she's baffled that you have that. That's stalkerish. God, people make mistakes. All right. God, I think you made a lot of mistakes. I make big mistakes. God, you're not kidding me. We're not kidding you. Not a joke. Come on." God, 2 days later, on the 3rd of January, investigators brought Rod in for a formal interview. By that point, they had already executed search warrants on his car and apartment, and what they had found there had changed everything. Inside Rod's apartment, within moments of crossing the threshold, investigators found an open bag of black zip ties. Beside it, a cut portion of a zip tie tail separated from the restraints. On a surface nearby, a book titled 7 Ways to Be Her Hero. And in another location in the apartment, a suicide note, also recovered, a forged cancer diagnosis letter, and a fabricated hospital invoice, both created through a fake email account Rod had set up to impersonate a doctor. In his car, a handgun, but the single most devastating piece of evidence was the zip tie match. Crime scene technician Melanie Thrasher examined the restraints that had been used on Morgan's wrists. One had an unusual feature. 2 extra zip tie heads had been ratcheted onto it and then cut. When Thrasher compared the cut tail found in Rod's apartment against Morgan's restraints, the striations aligned exactly. It was, as Sergeant Hoff later described it, a perfect match. He added, "I would never have imagined having a piece of evidence like this." The zip ties had been purchased 2 days before the attack. Sergeant Hoff used the Lowe's app on his own phone to scan the UPC code from the bag in Rod's apartment. He traced the purchase to a transaction made on the 30th of December, 2020 at a Lowe's store in Cherokee County. It was paid for by debit card. The card belonged to Rod. Surveillance footage from the store confirmed the purchase. It had been recorded during the peak of the CO-19 pandemic when almost every customer was masked. Rod was not. His face was entirely visible on the camera. Apartment building surveillance supplied the next disclosure. There was no footage of anyone tapping on Rod's window that night. There was no mysterious stranger. What the cameras did reveal was Rod returning to his apartment that evening, disheveled, moving rapidly. And then just 4 minutes later at 1:24 in the morning, Rod departed again. He was wearing entirely different clothes and different shoes. He was carrying a plastic bag. That bag was never located. Investigators examined the contents of Rod's phone and laptop for his browser history. What they uncovered was a window into the weeks and months before the attack. How to alter the sound of your voice, how to choke someone unconscious, how long before you starve to death, how to gain sympathy from your ex, cancer diagnosis letters, how to crack an iPhone password. Each search was a piece in a mosaic, and the picture they created was unmistakable. On the 3rd of January, when investigators sat opposite Rod in the interview room, they had all of it. Sergeant Livers confronted him with the cancer deception. Rod's demeanor changed. "I don't know if I should talk to you guys anymore," he said. "I'm starting to get a really bad feeling about what angle you're coming from." He attempted to turn the interrogation back on the investigators. He told Livers, "I've already learned something about you. Your facial expressions. You keep scratching yourself and you get irritated by what I say." When investigators told him they had found zip ties in his apartment, he denied it flatly. "I don't have zip ties," he said. Sergeant Harris replied, "I know you don't. We have them now." When Rod was told that forensic analysis had linked the zip ties in his apartment to those used to restrain Morgan, he paused. "There's something funny going on here," he said. Deputy Chief ADA Rachel Ash, who took the case to sentencing, later described what the investigation had revealed about Rod's original intent. She said the evidence suggested a plan to kill Morgan and then himself. When he couldn't go through with that plan, he pivoted. He devised a new plan to rescue her instead, to play the hero, to use her trauma as a doorway back into her life. That is what the book in his apartment was about. That is what the search history was about. And that is why when he arrived on her porch in the middle of the night, he already knew exactly what he would find. Rod Metzer was charged with 14 felony counts, including kidnapping, home invasion, burglary, armed robbery, aggravated assault, aggravated battery, sexual battery, false imprisonment, and possession of a firearm during commission of a crime. On the 4th of August 2021, he pleaded guilty to all 14. There was no trial. There was no jury. Ada Rachel Ash made the decision to accept the plea because she wanted Morgan to have closure sooner than a trial would allow. She also stated plainly, the evidence was overwhelming. "This is a prosecutor's dream case," she said. He took the guilty plea quickly. Rod received a sentence of 70 years, 25 years to be served in custody, followed by 45 years on probation. The majority of his custodial time is ineligible for early parole. His earliest possible release date is the 31st of December 2045. He is permanently banned from contacting Morgan or their children in any way. Ada Ash called Rod a master manipulator. She said what had been planned was first a murder. When he could not go through with it, he chose to orchestrate a rescue instead. He wanted to be the man she ran to. He wanted to be the reason she stayed. Morgan delivered her victim impact statement before the court. She looked at Rod and said, "The last 4 years being married to you was like living with a monster that constantly tried to break me down and fence me in. It was a blessing in disguise. I can now walk with the confidence knowing the pain you have given me is turned into power." Morgan later described leaving that courtroom. She said it felt like 1,000 pounds had been lifted from her shoulders. She said she got the last word. Morgan Metz lives in Woodstock, Georgia, with her twins who are now 14-year-old. She still runs Shiplap and Sugar. She has 3 dogs. She is rebuilding. She is also speaking. In the years since the attack, Morgan has used every platform available to her to talk about what happened. Not just the events of New Year's Day, but the years that preceded it, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the slow erosion of her ability to trust her own instincts. She has said that she wants people to understand that abuse does not always announce itself loudly. It can be quiet, it can be small, it can be the kind of thing that accumulates so gradually that by the time you understand what has happened, you have already been living inside it for years. She told Today, "If I don't take what came of this and use it to help people, then it happened for no reason." She remains in therapy. She continues hearing his voice in her dreams, changed and low and mechanical, like something from a film. She says it remains something she bears, but she is bearing it onward, not behind. This case has afterward been covered by CBS 48 Hours, highlighted on Investigation Discovery's Evil Lives Here, and transformed into a Lifetime film titled Gaslit by My Husband, The Morgan Metz Story, which reached #1 on Netflix in 2026. It has been viewed by millions. Morgan has stated that is the purpose. The more individuals who recognize this pattern, the more individuals who may identify it before it reaches its breaking point. Because for Morgan, the breaking point was a masked person in her bedroom doorway at half midnight on New Year's Day. But the story did not finish there. She survived. She stood in that courtroom. She faced the man who had assaulted and strangled and tied her in the eyes, and she told him that everything he had done to destroy her had only made her stronger. That is who Morgan Metz is. The case of Liga Squamine. India is the sole country in the world where cultural and religious customs have not been disrupted since ancient times, which is likely why it draws tourists from across the planet. But in our story, we will view India like a coin that bears a different image on each side. On April 20th, 2018, at dawn, 2 young men went angling along the river toward a mangrove forest. They took a lengthy boat ride downstream until they arrived at a distant and peaceful place. One of them leaped into the water to secure the boat, but his attention was diverted by a pungent, acrid odor that was extremely close by. They went ashore and traced the odor. Curiosity guided them to a horrifying discovery. There was something that resembled a human body hanging from a tree branch and a skull resting nearby. The guys left the boat and hurried to the nearest village to report the dreadful discovery. A team of investigators, forensic experts, and police officers immediately arrived at the scene. The experts confirmed that the hanging body was indeed human. It was evident that it had been hanging for a long period and had already started to decompose. The flesh on the arms and legs had ripped away, and the skull was discovered nearby. Beside the body were packs of cigarettes, packaged drinking water, and a lighter which probably belonged to the victim. An investigation was carried out at the scene the same morning. The evidence recovered was seized, and the remains were sent for examination. The modest remnants of clothing that could be identified on the victim revealed that Liga Squamine, a 33-year-old hiker, was the victim of an accident. But who is Liga Squamine and what happened to her on the riverbank? Liga Squamine was born in Latvia in 1986. She grew up in a large and friendly family, had an older brother and a younger sister. The sisters were very friendly and from childhood shared all joys and hardships with each other. Growing up, Liga moved to Ireland but always maintained close relations with her family. It was in Ireland that she met Andrew Jordan. It was not love at first sight, as the modest Liga had difficulty in communicating with new people. But after 5 years, Liga and Andrew turned into a married couple who made great plans for the future. Despite the fact that Liga worked in a hotel and led a modest lifestyle, she dreamed of opening her own center of yogic retreats in Portugal. Andrew supported his beloved's idea, and together, they saved money for 4 years to fulfill their dream. But fate had other plans. In was experiencing the effects of an aggravated skin disease that was causing physical and mental discomfort. To help her sister overcome this ailment and restore her emotional state, her sister Ilsa invited Liga on a trip. So in February 2018, an ILS traveled to Thiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, so that Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Kovalam is the premier Ayurvedic resort of Kerala in India. Kovalam, which means grove of coconut palms in Hindi, is a small village offering everything you need for a comfortable and complete rest and treatment. Ayurveda is the oldest system of medical knowledge, which originated more than 5,000 years ago. Ayurveda is based on the universal laws of nature, on the unity of all things in this world. Ayurvedic programs help a person to restore balance and harmony in the body. Panchakarma is the best Ayurvedic program for modern man in Kerala. Panchakarma helps to reboot the body effectively. Most of those who have undergone the Panchakarma course in Kerala repeat it annually. And it is not without reason, as regular Panchakarma not only allows us to get rid of extra pounds, but also adds a couple of decades of healthy life. Since 1985, has been recognized by the World Health Organization as the most effective system of alternative medicine in the world. Let us emphasize that all the promised benefits of Ayurveda are only an alternative, not a panacea for healthy longevity. The 33-year-old Liga and her sister came to Kerala in search of spiritual enlightenment, hoping to be cured of depression in one of the Ayurveda centers. Their treatment tour was scheduled for 6 weeks and included yoga classes, meditation, therapeutic herbal drinks, and nutritional and massage recommendations. The sisters were treated together at an Ayurvedic clinic at Kovalam in Kerala and have already completed their course. On the morning of March 14th, refused to go to yoga class with her sister, explaining that she had a headache. When Isla returned to her room, Liga was not there. With the help of the hotel staff, Liga was able to find out that her sister left the hotel around 30 a.m., wearing leggings and a yoga t-shirt, hired an auto rickshaw, and went to Kovalam Beach for a walk. The beaches around Kovalam are popular destinations for both domestic and international travelers. The sandy beaches of Kovalam are always crowded. However, Liga could not be found there. Liga wandered the beach until late at night, showing her sister's picture, but never heard the long-awaited response that someone had seen her. This was actually strange, as Liga was a tall white girl who definitely stood out, and if she was actually on the beach, someone should have seen her. After searching unsuccessfully, Isla went to the police station to report her sister missing. However, the Indian police officers did not show any sympathy for the missing foreign tourist. On the contrary, they complacently asserted that they would surely find the girl who had strayed, or that she would surely return the next day. They were not even deterred by the fact that Liga, according to her sister, had psychological problems and could be an easy target for criminals. The police registered a case, but the investigation started coldly, or rather, it is more correct to say, did not start at all. Liga had traveled extensively in Kerala, visiting Kollam, Varkala, and finally came to Kovalam. She considered herself a very experienced traveler in India, and this time she took her sister with her to show her the India she loved so much. But the trip turned tragic. After a few days of inaction by the Indian police, Liga started searching on her own. She enlisted the help of friends and also reported Liga missing to her husband, Andrew, who flew urgently to India. The police investigation intensified after the missing person's husband, Andrew Jordan, and Liga contacted the local press and started an online campaign to find her. Liga also reached out via Twitter to India's foreign minister, Sushma Swaraj. "Please help. My sister, a Latvian citizen, has been missing for 8 days. We are very worried," she wrote. The desperate sister announced a reward of 100,000 rupees to anyone who could help find Liga or provide any information about her movements that day. Liga and her friend Alexa, who had also traveled to India after hearing about Liga's disappearance, put up posters in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Together, they put up flyers and distributed them to people. Numerous locals took an active part in the search for the missing tourist. The important fact remained that Liga suffered from depression and had a hard time interacting with strangers. On the day of her disappearance, she hired an auto rickshaw to reach the beach and was never seen again. She had about 8,000 rupees with her, but no passport, so she could not leave the country. Ashok Kumar, head of the local police station, said that the police had no leads in the case. The police kept saying that the tourist had gone on a bender or eloped and would soon return on her own. However, regular, persistent requests for help from Liga and Andrew forced the police to search for Liga. The search operation was conducted in the Kovalam beach area, where Liga Scani was last seen. Police assumed that she had drowned, just as the unidentified body of a woman was found washed ashore at Kakal in Kanyakumari district. Investigators examined the body along with the missing woman's sister, but the latter did not identify it as her sister. The version of drowning was not confirmed, and the search for Lager continued. Andrew, on the other hand, was convinced that his wife had been kidnapped by local gangs for the purpose of selling her. He tried to infiltrate these gangs to get more information, but was exposed and warned that repeated contact with the gangs would result in him having to leave the country. A month after Liga went missing, there were still no leads to help find the girl. Liga continued to look for her sister. She visited Kovalam beach every day and watched people. On one such day, she spotted a boat, and she had a theory the only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. On April 17, 2018, after a forced hiatus, Andrew returned to India to continue his search. Liga and Andrew entered a new struggle to find Liga Skramana, but her body was still not found. The search was complicated by the fact that Liga was a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry said the embassy was in constant contact with Liga's relatives and was also working closely with the Indian police. The Latvian embassy also appealed to the Indian Foreign Ministry with a request for special support in the search for Liga, as well as the Honorary Council of Latvia in India, whose consular district includes the region where Liga disappeared. At the request of the Kerala state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force joined the search for the missing Latvian citizen. The The search operation involved an NN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. But even this extensive effort did not bring the desired result, and Liga remained missing. The search continued, and by this time all local residents knew about the missing tourist from Latvia. They supported and sympathized with Andrew and Liger. On April 20, 2018, phone received the longest-awaited yet most horrific call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew drove to the designated spot where the police were waiting for them. For the boat crossing, Liga's heart was pounding like never before. She felt that, for the moment, she would have to swim the path that Liga had traveled to her demise. On the spot, horror overwhelmed her. Liger saw her sister's clothes. She recognized the shirt and leggings on the body. But the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liger. It remained unclear how, with whom, and why Liga had gotten to a place that could only be accessed by going through Panadar from Samudra Beach. 2 women confirmed that they had witnessed Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But why would a girl who was being treated for depression and already alone take a boat to a remote place in the forest? The body was shifted to the Medical College Hospital, where it underwent an autopsy, which was captured on video camera. The police said they could not confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was completed. According to the city police commissioner, the body was badly mutilated, with the head lying nearby. Police tentatively identified the dead woman as missing tourist Liga Skrumane. In favor of the investigators' conclusions is also the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One of the versions put forward by rescue services in India was poisoning. There are poisonous pong-pong trees in the mangrove forest, and she could have accidentally or intentionally eaten their fruit and poisoned herself. Between 1989 and 1999, more than 500 people died from poisoning by its fruits in Kerala alone. However, this theory seemed nonsensical because the person was found hanging upside down, but there was no head. It is obvious that if Liga had been poisoned, her body would have been in a completely different position, and the head would have been in place. The Indian authorities were talking utter nonsense. Based on the information about Liga's complex psychological problems, the investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had voluntarily taken her own life. Liga feared that the police would try to pass off her sister's murder as a voluntary departure from life. Although a rope had been found at the scene, and it could be concluded that the hiker had hanged herself, Liga demanded a separate explanation for the missing head. "Don't tell me it's lost," Liga said sarcastically in yet another appeal on the internet. Breathlessly, Liga and the anxious public waited for the results of the forensic tests. The forensic results were overwhelming. The report stated that there were areas of blood pooling in part of Liga Skramen's brain, as well as bruising in the neck area. The autopsy revealed that the woman had been strangled by several people and was killed in an attempted violent attack. There were external injuries on the body, probably sustained during the struggle. However, the fact of violence could not be definitively confirmed, as the body was in the decomposition stage. There were characteristic injuries on the cartilage in her throat, which indicated that someone had forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe enough to be fatal, according to forensic experts. There were blood clots in her brain, which confirmed strangulation. They also noted that there were bruises on her neck and legs. A total of 9 wounds were recorded on Liga Skramen's body. In view of the above, the police no longer considered the version of voluntary death. According to the autopsy, it was determined that Liga was murdered after resisting or struggling. Ilse breathed a sigh of relief and hoped that the police would soon find her sister's killers. But there were complications as well. As part of the investigation, the police began checking out local drug dealers and card players. In addition, during interviews with local residents, 2 women said that they saw Liga walking alone to the place where her body was later found. But the police said they did not fully trust their words. Meanwhile, Liga's relatives have accused Indian police of incompetence, claiming that if the girl had been searched for immediately, the tragedy could have been avoided. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is believed to have been grabbed from a nearby beach and transported by boat before being strangled. A special team of investigators has begun looking for those responsible for the crime. About 40 suspects were interviewed. However, arrests were planned to be made a few days later. After the law enforcers had enough evidence, the Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men, who were eventually accused of killing Liga Skrame. Police revealed that Legis Grimmen was lured by two men, who then abused her before dismembering her body. The alleged assailants, who are now in custody, are local dealers in illegal substances. The suspects fully confessed under torture. Both the accused were pimps and were also dealing in illegal substances, police said. The autopsy did not reveal much evidence because Luga's body was badly decomposed. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court for a review of the felony murder case. He believed that more people were involved in the woman's murder. In the petition, he pointed out that both defendants later recanted their pleas of guilty to the crime. According to Jordan, the men may have confessed because they were tortured, which, as it turns out, is a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband, Andrew Jordan, a review of the case due to lack of direct evidence. The trial was postponed for 2 months, but Andrew was outraged by this attitude of the authorities. He had earlier accused the Kerala authorities and police of incompetence and attempts to cover up Luga's murder so as not to scare away tourists. Both the suspects' lawyers asked for and got a postponement by law. They have the right to postpone the case once without giving any reason. The more they postponed, the more he was convinced the case was unclean. However, both suspects were in custody. Investigation revealed that 32-year-old Umesh and 28-year-old Ajay Kumar offered Luga Scane weed, and when she was drugged, they used it and then strangled and decapitated her. It is noted that the two men apprehended for the murder of Luga Scram had previously committed similar crimes on numerous occasions. Both of them worked for a food delivery company in the Kerala capital and earned money as illegal tour guides in their spare time. Umesh and Ajay Kumar have been charged with destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The place where Luga's corpse was found had earlier served as a pleasure ground for Umesh. He used to take men there. 13 criminal cases have been filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have testified against him. Luga Scram, along with both men, were seen in the area by several people. They were at first silent, but admitted to everything after the body was discovered. The detainees admitted to police that they committed the murder while attempting violence. They were apprehended but had earlier claimed that they had only seen Luga Scram in Kovalam. The men pleaded guilty following repeated interrogations. On December 6, 2022, the court ultimately sentenced both men to life in prison. The court also ruled that the criminals must pay compensation to Luga Scram's sister, Ilse, 65,000 rupees each. We would like to mention that there has been an entire series of such crimes in this country recently. Young girls are routinely subjected to violence. The problem of crime in India is very serious. Due to the enormous number of sexual acts against minors, the government has implemented the death penalty. It is also worth mentioning that if the relatives and primarily Luga's sister had not remained persistent, had they not involved the press by organizing a press conference and an influential MP, it is obvious that the local police would scarcely have seriously investigated the case. At first, a theory was proposed that Luga had allegedly passed away voluntarily, and as it now appears, this is not the first incident in this exact place where Luga was found. After this story, I would like to warn once again all women who are careless about the dangers of traveling alone in India. Do not pursue spiritual enlightenment in distant, dangerous, and unexplored countries. Canton, Massachusetts. A savage blizzard is engulfing the suburbs, yet across the manicured lawn of a veteran officer's home, a dark figure pierces the surface of the snow. It is the frozen body of Officer John O'Keefe, his skull fractured, his eyes swollen closed. While only steps away, his colleagues are indoors celebrating. This is not a simple accident. It is the opening strike of a legal civil war. A damaged tail light on a luxury SUV will soon turn a professor into a deliberate killer, or the target of a massive multi-agency cover-up. In a town founded on blue blood, the question remains, was he abandoned to die or was he dumped? Into this world of silent sacrifice entered Karen Reed. On paper, she was the demographic opposite of the insular blue-collar police circles O'Keefe inhabited. Reed was a woman of exceptional intellect and corporate ambition. A Bentley University professor and an equity analyst for one of the world's largest investment firms, she maneuvered the high-stakes world of finance with a precision that made her a formidable presence in her field. Yet, her professional success concealed a personal resilience shaped through chronic health struggles. For years, Red had endured Crohn's disease, a condition that required a disciplined, often restrictive lifestyle. This was not a woman who lived carelessly. She was a woman who measured risks, both in the market and in her everyday health. When she and O'Keefe revived a connection during the early days of the pandemic, it appeared like a meeting of two steady forces. They were both in their 40s, both established in their careers, and both apparently ready for a partner who understood the burden of adult responsibilities. Yet the union wasn't without its tension points. Reed was stepping into a ready-made family, a house in Mansfield that already had its own routines, its own history, and two children who were the center of O'Keefe's universe. The transition was complicated. While the couple shared high-end vacations and a social life that stretched across the affluent suburbs of Norfolk County, the daily burden of guardianship added a layer of strain. There were whispers of disputes over the children, over the division of labor, and over the ordinary stresses that burden any relationship where two independent lives are compelled to merge. Despite this, they remained a fixture within their social circle, a circle that was strongly dominated by the blue wall of the Boston Police Department. This social landscape is where the story becomes unclear. The Canton Circle was a close-knit web of law enforcement families, including the Alberts and the McCabe's. These were people who had been raised together, worked together, and defended one another. Brian Albert, a fellow Boston police officer, owned the home at 34 Fairview Road, the very house where the night would ultimately end. To be in this circle was to belong to an unofficial brotherhood where loyalty was the greatest currency. Karen Redd, the finance professional from outside the force, was always somewhat of an outsider in this group. She was the civilian among officers, the academic among street cops. By the winter of 2022, the couple had been together for roughly 2 years. Managing the highs of companionship and the lows of suburban tension, they were two people attempting to build a future beneath the shadow of a looming New England winter. Unaware that the insular world they mingled in was about to become the scene of a national controversy. The Mansfield home, once a refuge for O'Keefe's niece and nephew, was about to be left empty, and the woman who shared his bed would soon be cast as his executioner. The relationship between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe was not a result of a whirlwind suburban romance. It was a renewal, a second attempt at a spark that had first glimmered nearly 2 decades earlier. Back in the mid-2000s, they had dated briefly as young professionals, but the timing was wrong, and their lives had drifted into separate orbits. When they reconnected in 2020, the world was in the grip of a global standstill. The isolation of the pandemic served as a strange pressurized incubator. They found each other again through social media. Two people now in their 40s, tired of the transient nature of modern dating and seeking something that felt like home. For Karen, O'Keefe represented a rare grounded stability. He was a man of service, a protector by trade, and a devoted guardian to his orphaned niece and nephew. For O'Keefe, Reed was an intellectual equal, a woman whose financial acumen and professional independence were a sharp, refreshing contrast to the often insular world of the Boston Police Department. By the time the snow began to gather in early 2022, the couple had spent nearly 2 years managing a shared life in Mansfield, but their home was never genuinely theirs alone. It was a house shaped by the presence of 2 teenagers and the heavy, lingering shadow of their loss. O'Keefe had converted his bachelor existence into a relentless cycle of household duty, school schedules, sports practices, and the quiet, constant management of grief. Rad stepped into this ready-made family, not merely as a girlfriend, but as a caregiver. She reportedly spent tens of thousands of dollars on the children, financing vacations, electronics, and everyday comforts that a police officer's salary could not always support. She was present at their games and school events, trying to stitch herself into a family tapestry that had been torn and repaired before her arrival. Yet beneath the surface of high-end dinners and suburban normalcy, the strain was creating deep, jagged fractures. The transition from a fiercely independent corporate lifestyle to the role of a bonus parent is a massive psychological shift for anyone. But for Reed, it was intensified by the physical toll of her Crohn's disease. There were days when her body simply rebelled, leaving her exhausted and in need of a quiet sanctuary that a house with 2 teenagers rarely offered. On the other hand, John O'Keefe was a product of the blue wall. His refuge was not silence. It was the loud, rowdy camaraderie of the local bars in Canton and South Boston. He found his comfort in the company of fellow officers, men like Brian Albert and Matthew McCabe, where the air was heavy with the smell of stale beer and the steady, aggressive cadence of police shop talk. Karen Reed was always somewhat of an outsider in this brotherhood. She was the professor among street cops, the finance executive among men who prided themselves on blue-collar grit. This point of friction allegedly became a flashpoint during a New Year's Eve getaway to Aruba just weeks before the tragedy. What was meant to be a romantic escape from the Massachusetts winter reportedly deteriorated into a theater of public conflict. Witnesses described a blistering argument that erupted in the hotel lobby, a shouting match that left the rest of their social circle uneasy. Reed had allegedly noticed O'Keefe in a conversation with the wife of another officer, and driven by a mixture of exhaustion and deep-seated insecurity, reportedly accused him of infidelity before their peers. It wasn't merely a spat, it was a fundamental collapse of trust. Upon their return to the States, the atmosphere in the Mansfield home became icy. O'Keefe reportedly admitted to friends that the relationship had become a source of constant stress, a burden he was no longer certain he wanted to carry, alongside the responsibility of raising his sister's children. He was reportedly pursuing a graceful exit, a way to untangle their lives without causing further trauma to the household. Red, meanwhile, was described by some as becoming progressively vigilant. Her messages to O'Keefe shifted between deep affection and sharp, bitter resentment. She reportedly tracked his movements with a forensic intensity, questioning his loyalties and his whereabouts. They were trapped in a classic, exhausting cycle of breaking up and making up, their lives fused by shared finances and the needs of the children, while their emotional connection was unraveling at the seams. The social dynamics of Canton added another layer of complexity. To be an Albert or a McCabe in that town was to belong to a local dynasty. They were the unofficial royalty of Norfolk County law enforcement, a close-knit web of families who had grown up on the same streets and now policed them. When Red and O'Keefe socialized with this group, they were entering a world where loyalty to the circle was the highest currency. For a woman like Reed, who valued openness and intellectual rigor, the unspoken rules and fierce protections of the Canton circle must have seemed like a foreign language. On the Friday before that fateful Saturday morning, the weather was not the only thing becoming hostile. Reed had been managing the demands of her high-stakes career, likely occupied with the social obligations of the upcoming weekend. O'Keefe was focused on the routine of the kids, the school runs, and the preparations for the massive storm that every meteorologist in the state was predicting. There was no outward indication that this was the end of their story as a couple. They were simply two people in a failing relationship, going through the motions of a Friday night in January. But as the first flakes of the nor'easter started to drift down through the street lights of Cannon, the stage was prepared for their private misery to erupt into a national scandal. The blue wall was about to be challenged, and the woman who had spent 2 years trying to find her place within it was about to be portrayed as its greatest enemy. The evening of Friday, January 28, 2022, began with the kind of restless energy that always precedes a major New England storm. Meteorologists had been raising the alarm for days. A massive nor'easter was advancing toward the coast, promised to bury the suburbs of Boston beneath a foot or more of heavy, wet snow. In Canton, the air already carried that metallic, biting chill that signals a deep freeze. For John O'Keefe, it was meant to be a respite, a night to step away from his role as a guardian and reconnect with the boisterous, blue-blooded world of his fellow officers. Around 9:00 p.m., he and Karen Reed arrived at C.F. McCarthy's, a local fixture where the warmth of the bar and the hum of conversation offered a sharp contrast to the gathering darkness outside. Surveillance footage from the establishment captured a couple that appeared, at least for the moment, in sync. They were seen at the bar leaning toward one another, O'Keefe in a casual pullover, Reed in a black top, both of them sharing the easy, rhythmic gestures of people who had spent hundreds of evenings just like this one. O'Keefe was drinking Titles and soda served in a tall glass with a lemon wedge, a detail that would later be examined with forensic intensity. Red was seen with a glass of her own, a clear liquid that the prosecution would later argue was the start of a heavy night of consumption. They weren't alone for long. The social gravity of Cannon meant that every few minutes a familiar face would appear from the crowd. They spoke with friends and colleagues, the atmosphere light and unburdened by the storm warnings flickering on the overhead televisions. But as the clock approached 11 p.m., the group decided to move the scene across the street to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, a slightly more spacious venue that could better accommodate the growing circle of officers and their spouses. The walk across the street was brief, but the wind was picking up, swirling the first few flakes of snow through the yellow glow of the streetlights. Inside the waterfall, the group expanded to include the heavy hitters of the local social scene. Brian Albert, a prominent Boston police officer, his wife Nicole and Jennifer McCabe, Nicole's sister, and a central figure in the web of Canton families. Also present was Brian Higgins, an agent with the ATF, who shared a close, if complicated, friendship with the couple. The group gathered around a high-top table near the back, the camaraderie typical of a close-knit law enforcement circle. The footage from the waterfall shows O'Keefe and Reed moving through the space with ease. At one point, they are seen sharing a brief cinematic moment of affection that would later be used by the defense to argue that there was no murderous intent in the air that night. As the bar's lights flickered for last call, just after midnight, an invitation was offered. The Alberts were heading back to their home at 34 Fairview Road for an after-party. It was a casual gathering to mark Brian Albert Jr.'s 23rd birthday, and the group was encouraged to join. For O'Keefe and Reed, it was a decision that would change everything. At 12:11 a.m., surveillance cameras captured them, departing the waterfall together. They stepped out into a world that had transformed in the 3 hours they'd been inside. The blizzard had officially arrived. The ground was now a slick white sheet, and the air was a chaotic blur of driving snow. They climbed into Red's luxury Lexus LX 57O, a heavy 3-ton SUV designed to handle exactly these conditions. The engine's low growl was drowned by the howling wind as they pulled away from the curb. Red was behind the wheel, steering through the intensifying whiteout, while O'Keefe sat in the passenger seat, likely checking his phone for the address. They weren't entirely certain of the way. Jennifer McCabe later testified that she spoke with O'Keefe over the phone around 12:14 a.m. to provide specific directions to the Fairview residents. The drive was roughly 2 miles, a journey that usually takes 6 minutes, but felt much longer as the Lexus's headlights struggled to cut through the wall of white. At 12:24 a.m., the heavy SUV pulled alongside the curb in front of 34 Fairview Road. The house was a large colonial-style home, its windows glowing with the party inside, but the exterior was a dark, frozen landscape. What occurred in the next 10 minutes remains the black hole at the center of this case. According to the prosecution's timeline, the Lexus didn't remain parked for long. They argue that within minutes of arriving, a violent confrontation occurred, or perhaps a tragic alcohol-fueled mistake that ended with Red reversing her massive vehicle into O'Keefe, striking him with enough force to shatter the taillight and send him sprawling onto the front lawn. However, a different scene was being witnessed by those outside. Ryan Nagel, who had driven to the house with 2 friends in a Ford F-150 to pick up his sister, testified to seeing the black Lexus idling at the curb. He stated that he saw a woman, Karen Reed, sitting in the driver's seat alone. He described the vehicle's movements as careful and deliberate, noting that he didn't see any sign of a struggle or a body in the snow as they pulled away. Inside the Albert home, the party was in full swing, yet every person in that house, nearly a dozen witnesses, would later testify that they never saw John O'Keefe enter. They saw the Lexus outside. They saw the headlights, but the gentle giant never walked through the door. By 12:32 a.m., the Lexus was gone. Karen Red had allegedly become impatient or frustrated when O'Keefe didn't return to the car, and she began the treacherous drive back to O'Keefe's home in Mansfield. Her phone records show the device connecting to his home Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m., a 4-minute journey that the prosecution claims was a desperate flight from a crime scene, while the defense argues it was the actions of a woman who assumed her boyfriend had simply remained at the party without her. As Reed walked onto the hardwood floors of the quiet house in Mansfield, the storm was reaching its peak. Back at 34 Fairview Road, the front lawn was becoming a graveyard. John O'Keefe lay in the grass, just feet from the roadway, his body slowly being entombed by the relentless snowfall. He was dressed for a bar, not a blizzard, no hat, no gloves, and only a single shoe remained on his foot. The other was nowhere to be found. The people inside the house continued their celebration, oblivious, or perhaps, as the defense suggests, fully aware that a brother in arms was cooling in the dark just outside their front door. The silence of the Mansfield home and the roar of the Canton wind were the only witnesses to the transition from a Friday night out to a life-shattering tragedy. The silence inside John O'Keefe's Mansfield home broke just before 5 a.m. Karen Red had drifted into an uneasy sleep on the couch, still wearing the clothes from the night before. But the realization that the bed upstairs was empty struck her with the force of a physical blow. The storm was still raging outside, a relentless wall of white, and her boyfriend, a man of strict habits and deep responsibility toward the children sleeping in the rooms above, had disappeared. Between 4:33 a.m. and 5 a.m., Reed's panic manifested in a digital blizzard of her own. She placed 53 calls to O'Keefe's cell phone, each one slipping into a voicemail that would never be checked. Her voice captured in the recordings shifted from irritation to a jagged, high-pitched terror. Desperate for answers, Red contacted the woman who had been the social architect of the previous night, Jennifer McCabe. When McCabe answered her phone at 5:07 a.m., she was met with a woman who sounded completely unhinged. Red was screaming, her thoughts tangled in a dark web of possibilities. She told McCabe that John hadn't come home, that she didn't know where she had left him. In a detail that would later become a cornerstone of the prosecution's case, McCabe claimed that Red looked out at her Lexus LX 570 oiling in the driveway and noticed a cracked rear tail light, wondering aloud if she could have hit him. By 5:30 a.m., a search party of 3 women had assembled in the pre-dawn gloom. Red, Jennifer McCabe, and Carrie Roberts, another close friend of O'Keefe. They navigated the treacherous, unplowed streets of Canton in Roberts' vehicle, the windshield wipers straining against the freezing crust of the Nor'aster. The conversation inside the car was a frantic cycle of speculation. Red was reportedly inconsolable, her eyes fixed on the drifts of snow beyond the window. They checked the route they had taken, peered into the dark windows of the waterfall bar, and finally, as the first gray light of a miserable Saturday morning began to spread into the sky, they turned onto Fairview Road. The Albert residence at number 34 was a dark silhouette against the white landscape. As the car slowed, Red screamed for Roberts to stop. Despite the near-zero visibility and the heavy accumulation of snow, Reed claimed to see a dark shape on the lawn. She rushed from the vehicle before it had fully stopped, her feet sinking deep into the drifts. Behind her, McCabe and Roberts followed, their breath catching in the frigid air. There, lying on his back beneath a light shroud of fresh powder, was John O'Keefe. The scene was a visceral, frozen nightmare. O'Keefe's body was positioned roughly 12 feet from the curb, his arm extended as if reaching for a door that was no longer there. His face was a mask of trauma. His eyes were swollen, a deep, bruised purple, and a cluster of jagged lacerations marked his right arm. He was missing a shoe. The gentle giant was cold to the touch, his body already stiffening in the New England frost. Red collapsed onto him, her screams muffled by the roar of the wind, attempting to use her own body heat to restore life to a man who had likely been dead for hours. In the chaotic minutes that followed, Jennifer McCabe called 911. Her voice was frantic as she reported a man down in the snow, unresponsive and dead cold. As they waited for the sirens to cut through the storm, McCabe and Roberts later testified to a series of haunting outbursts from Reed. They claimed she was pacing in circles, her hands over her mouth, repeating a rhythmic, devastating confession. "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." To the prosecution, this was the spontaneous utterance of a guilty woman. To the defense, it was a hysterical question. A woman in shock trying to make sense of a world that had just collapsed, asking, "Did I hit him?" First responders arrived at 6:04 a.m., their boots crunching on the frozen lawn as they pushed through the crowd of hysterical women. They found O'Keefe in cardiac arrest, his core temperature so low it didn't even register on their initial equipment. As the paramedics worked to stabilize him, clearing the snow from his airway and beginning the rhythmic compressions of CPR, they noted a strange detail. The lawn of 34 Fairview Road remained eerily quiet. Despite the flashing blue and red lights, the wail of the sirens, and the shouting of emergency crews, the front door of the Albert home, the home of a fellow Boston police officer, remained closed. No one from the after-party emerged to see what the chaos was about. No one stepped out into the cold to help a brother in arms. By the time the ambulance pulled away, headed for Good Samaritan Medical Center, the investigation had already begun in the snow. A Canton police officer, shielded from the wind by his cruiser, noticed several fragments of broken red and clear plastic scattered near the spot where O'Keefe had been found. They were the jagged remains of a vehicle's taillight. As the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, the blue wall began to close around Fairview Road, and the woman who had spent the morning searching for her boyfriend was about to become the chief suspect in his murder. The discovery of the body was the end of the search, but it was the beginning of a conspiracy theory that would set the entire state of Massachusetts on fire. The investigation into the death of John O'Keefe began not with a meticulous forensic sweep, but with a series of improvised decisions that would later haunt the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As the ambulance sped away from 34 Fairview Road, the Canton police and state police investigators faced a crime scene that was rapidly vanishing beneath inches of fresh snow. In a detail that would become an emblem of the defense's argument, investigators reportedly collected blood samples from the snow using red Solo cups borrowed from a neighbor, sealing them with duct tape. This absence of standard forensic protocol was the first crack in a case that was about to become a chasm. Lead investigator Michael Proctor of the Massachusetts State Police took the reins of the case almost immediately. To the public, he was a veteran investigator. To the defense, he was a walking conflict of interest. Proctor, it was later revealed, had deep-seated social ties to the Albert family. His wife was close friends with the family inside the house where O'Keefe's body was found, and he had socialized in the same close-knit Canton circles for years. Despite this, he did not remove himself. Instead, he directed the narrative toward a single conclusion. Karen Reed had killed her boyfriend in a fit of drunken rage. The prosecution's theory was built on the physical evidence found in the drifts. They pointed to the fragments of red and clear plastic discovered near O'Keefe's head, jagged pieces that a state lab matched to the broken taillight of Reed's Lexus LX 570. They argued that the vehicle's internal computer data showed a reverse event at 12:42 a.m., claiming Reed accelerated backward at 24 miles per hour, striking O'Keefe with the rear of the 3-ton SUV and sending him tumbling into the grass. By early February, the initial charge of manslaughter was upgraded to second-degree murder. But then the defense team, led by high-profile attorneys Alan Jackson and David Iannetti, began to unravel the threads of the blue wall. They didn't just argue for Reed's innocence. They alleged a massive multi-agency cover-up designed to protect one of their own. They pointed to the wounds on O'Keefe's right arm, a series of parallel jagged lacerations that didn't resemble the blunt force trauma of a car bumper. Instead, they brought in forensic experts who suggested the marks were consistent with animal scratches, specifically a dog. The Alberts owned a German shepherd named Chloe at the time of the incident, a dog that was reportedly relocated across state lines shortly after the investigation began. The midpoint turning point in the investigation came through a digital bombshell. Forensic experts hired by the defense examined the cell phone of Jennifer McCabe. They claimed to find a Google search performed at 2:27 a.m., 3 hours before the body was officially discovered. The search query was chilling. Hose long to die in cold. While the prosecution's experts argued this was a timestamp glitch caused by an open browser tab from later that morning, the damage was done. To the growing Free Karen Reed movement, this was proof of a conspiracy. They argued O'Keefe had been beaten inside the Albert home, attacked by the dog, and then dragged out into the snow to die while the party guests coordinated their stories. As the case moved through 2023, the investigation expanded into the federal realm. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI launched an independent probe into the integrity of the local investigation, a move virtually unheard of in a state murder case. This federal intervention produced a 30,000-page report that reportedly contained expert testimony from independent accident reconstructionists. These experts, who had no ties to either side, concluded that the damage to the Lexus and the injuries to O'Keefe were physically impossible to achieve through a vehicle strike at 24 miles per hour. They suggested that O'Keefe's head trauma, a massive fracture to the rear of his skull, was more consistent with a fall onto a hard surface like a basement floor than a collision with a plastic tail light. The community of Canton became a powder keg. Local atmosphere shifted from quiet suburban mourning to a town under assault by truth seekers and protesters. Aidan Kearney, a local blogger known as Turtle Boy, amplified the defense's claims, leading to a surge of protesters in pink shirts, Reed's signature color, lining the streets outside the Norfolk County Courthouse. Rumors of burner phones, deleted text messages, and basement floors being replaced in the Albert home spread like wildfire. The lead investigator himself, Michael Proctor, was eventually compelled to admit during a deposition that he had sent derogatory, unprofessional texts about Rad to his colleagues, calling her crazy and making disparaging remarks about her medical condition. The exasperation of the detectives was unmistakable as their open and shut, hit-and-run case evolved into a referendum on police corruption. Every item of evidence was now examined through a prism of suspicion. Did the taillight fragments appear in the snow only after the police confiscated Reed's car? Why did the ring camera footage from O'Keefe's driveway appear to have a gap at the exact moment Reed was seen departing to search for him? The investigation had become a maze of reflections. The why and how of John O'Keefe's final moments were no longer merely a legal question. They became a cultural fixation driven by the paradox of a man left to freeze in a town where the police were supposed to be those who kept watch. The 2024 trial of Karen Reed was a televised clash of two opposing realities. For 10 weeks, the Canton Circle took the stand, defending their family reputations, while the prosecution portrayed Reed as a scorned woman who used her 3-ton SUV as a weapon. But the foundation of the Commonwealth's case collapsed beneath the testimony of its own lead investigator, Michael Proctor. He was compelled to confront his own toxicity, reading aloud personal, disparaging text messages about the woman he was investigating. Despite the forensic disputes over taillight fragments and digital timestamps, the jury reached a deadlock. On July 1, 2024, the judge declared a mistrial. The outcome was no verdict at all. Canton remains a town divided by the blue wall and a movement in pink, while the defense fights for the dismissal of charges based on claims that the jury had actually reached a private consensus to acquit on 2 counts. The legal clock has restarted. In 2025, the battle starts again. The lawn at 34 Fairview Road is clear now, the snow long since thawed. But the house remains a monument to a mystery with no simple escape. For John O'Keefe's family, the courtroom isn't a refuge. It's a battleground where his memory is caught between 2 conflicting versions of the truth. Whether Karen Reed is a killer or a scapegoat, one reality remains. A guardian was left in the cold while his own circle celebrated inside. In Canton, justice isn't just blind, it's buried beneath the weight of the blue wall and the echoes of a storm that never truly ended. Joanna Yates was born on April 19, 1985 in Britain. She was raised in a small village, and from an early age she adored nature. That enthusiasm influenced the route she selected later on, and after school, Joanna attended university where she obtained a degree in landscape architecture. After graduating, she became part of one of the leading firms in that field and rapidly distinguished herself as someone with a true innate talent for the job. In addition, Joanna was warm, friendly, and sincerely kind, which made it simple for her to bond with the people around her. In December of 2008, she met a man named Greg, who had likewise just begun working at the same company. He was an architect who, like Joanna, had only recently graduated. Before long, the pair of them began dating, and they were already making serious plans for the future. About a year and a half after they met, Joanna and Greg decided to relocate to Bristol since their company was moving there. They also decided to lease a place together and begin living as a couple, which marked a fresh stage in their relationship. By the end of 2010, Joanna and Greg's life seemed to be coming into place. They were both building successful careers, settling into their new city, and seriously starting to think about marriage. They moved into a beautiful old house that had been divided into separate apartments. On Friday, December 17th, just before Christmas, Greg decided to head back to his hometown to see his family. He planned to return for the holiday and spend Christmas with Joanna, but until then, she was going to be on her own for the weekend. Even though Joanna was 25, she didn't like the idea of being alone in the new apartment. She was still getting used to the place, and she had a bad feeling about it, something she had mentioned to her coworkers. In response, they suggested all going out for drinks after work, just so Joanna wouldn't have to spend the whole weekend by herself. They went to a bar in the city center and spent a few fun hours there. Then, around 8:00 p.m., Joanna decided to call it a night, said goodbye to her coworkers, and started walking home. By that point, Greg had already arrived at his relative's house and texted Joanna to let her know, but she didn't reply. He knew she was out at the bar with coworkers, so he assumed she was either still out or had already gone home and gone to bed. Because of that, he didn't think too much of the silence. But the next morning, he noticed she still hadn't answered. He kept texting her all through Saturday and tried calling too, but got nothing back. Greg still wasn't prepared to panic and thought Joanna might just be occupied, but it definitely started to seem strange. Then Sunday came, and there was still no answer. That day, Greg returned home, walked up to the apartment door, and tried to open it. But to his surprise, it was already unlocked. Considering it was late in the evening and they lived on the ground floor facing the street, that immediately felt unusual. Greg went inside and started calling Joanna's name, but she wasn't there. At the time, all of her clothes and belongings were still in the apartment. As he moved from room to room, he decided to call her one more time, and to his surprise, he heard the ringtone coming from the hallway. When he went back, he realized Joanna's phone was in the pocket of her coat, along with her keys and other personal things. At that point, Greg was seriously terrified. He knew Joanna wouldn't have left the apartment without her keys, her phone, or her winter coat. As a final hope, he called her parents, and asked if they had any idea where she might be. But when they told him they hadn't spoken to her all weekend, Greg finally went to the police. The officers arrived at the apartment around the same time as Joanna's parents, and together they all started trying to determine what could have happened. Police quickly came to the conclusion that Joanna had most likely not left on her own while leaving all her belongings behind. They suspected that something terrible had happened to her and began searching the apartment for possible clues. Before long, Joanna's mother noticed the first important lead. There was a receipt in the apartment for a frozen pizza bought at a Tesco supermarket at around 8:40 p.m. that Friday. That meant Joanna had made it home from the bar, and at least at that point, she had probably been fine. The only odd thing detectives noticed was that the pizza itself, or even the box, was nowhere to be found in the apartment. The trash hadn't been taken out, but there was no pizza packaging in there either. Given the fact that Joanna had already stopped replying to Greg's messages by Friday evening, police started considering the possibility that something has happened to her shortly after she got home. One theory was that someone may have followed her back home from the bar, so officers headed out to collect surveillance footage along her route, talk to the co-workers who had been with her that night, and look for any possible witnesses. At the same time, detectives started questioning Joanna's neighbors. By then, several police cars were already outside the building, so some of the residents came out. Even though it was in the middle of the night, the neighbor who lived beside Joanna's flat said he hadn't seen or heard anything suspicious that evening. The other residents in the building shared similar observations. But when police started speaking to people in the houses across the street, they got something much more interesting. Several residents said they had heard distant screams at around 8:50 p.m. At the time, they assumed it was just someone drinking and messing around ahead of Christmas, so they hadn't paid much attention. Based on the time on the pizza receipt, detectives started to think those screams really could have been Joanna. If that was the case, then she must have been attacked just minutes after walking into the apartment. Police reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance footage along the route from the bar to Joanna's home, but nothing on it stood out as suspicious. They also saw her buying the pizza and then a few minutes later going into another shop and picking up 2 bottles of cider. Detectives found that cider in her flat, but someone had already taken a drink from one of the bottles. Police also asked the neighbors for permission to search their flats, and everyone agreed, but there was no sign of Joanna anywhere. The next day, local media picked up the story, and news of Joanna's disappearance spread quickly across the city. Detectives asked the public to share any information that might help locate her, and while they did receive a few tips, every one of them led nowhere. As for Joanna's flat, crime scene investigators didn't find anything useful there either. There were no signs of forced entry on the door, and inside there was no evidence of any struggle. It all looked as if Joanna had simply vanished into thin air without leaving a single real clue behind. That went on for more than a week until a phone call came into the police. On Christmas morning, December 25th, a couple were out walking their dog along a quiet country road on the edge of the city. That winter had brought heavy snow, so there were huge piles of it everywhere. And at first, nothing seemed unusual. But on their way back, one of those snowbanks caught their attention. Something inside looked like a pair of jeans, and the couple immediately thought of the missing woman whose case had been all over the news. Just to be safe, they called the police and officers came out to the road. When they dug into the snow, they found the body of a young woman, and even before the formal identification, police already knew they had just found Joanna. Because her body had been lying in the snow in freezing temperatures, there was almost no decomposition and no obvious visible injuries either. At first, that even made police wonder whether she might simply have succumbed to death, but medical examiners soon dismissed that idea. They found signs of manual strangulation on her neck, though the marks were fairly faint. Even so, that was how she died, which meant the killer had strangled her very gradually. At the same time, examiners found no signs of sexual assault. All of Joanna's clothes were still on her body, too, except for one absent sock. There was one more detail that stood out. There was no trace in her stomach of the pizza she had bought before she died. All of that led investigators to think the killer may have carried the pizza with him. The samples from Joanna's body, along with all of her belongings, were sent off to the lab in the hope that they might reveal at least some kind of evidence. Meanwhile, rumors about a possible serial killer started spreading across the city. Since police couldn't find any clear motive for Joanna's murder, They began considering the possibility that the killer hadn't been driven by sexual assault, personal hatred, or anything like that the killing itself may have been the purpose. Because of that, people in Bristol started fearing the attacker could strike again, and just about everyone was following the investigation in one way or another. 70 officers from different departments were assigned to the case immediately, making it one of the biggest investigations in the city's history. Detectives worked through hundreds of tip calls, went door to door looking for witnesses and surveillance footage, searched through the contents of garbage bins, but none of it brought them any nearer to the killer. Before long, a well-known non-profit organization offered a reward of £10,000 for information about Joanna's murder. And later, a British newspaper increased that amount to £50,000. As expected, that brought in even more tips, but still nothing that actually moved detectives toward an arrest. Because there were no signs of forced entry at Joanna's flat, investigators still believed the killer may have known her. After they accepted Greg's alibi and confirmed that he really had been in another city, police started looking at other possible suspects. And that was when one particular person caught their attention. 65-year-old Christopher Jeff. He was a retired college professor who had only recently stopped working, and he also happened to be the landlord of the flat Joanna and Greg had rented. Christopher owned 3 apartments in the building. He rented out 2 of them, and he lived in the third himself up on the top floor. That meant he had a key to Joanna's flat, which could have explained why there were no signs of forced entry. As detectives looked into his background, they learned that the former professor was seen as eccentric and withdrawn. He kept to himself, and when he did speak to people, his manner of speaking and the way he carried himself often struck them as odd. He spent most of his time alone at home, reading books or watching old videotapes. Police also couldn't find any close friends or relatives in Christopher's life. When Greg heard that detectives were starting to look at the landlord, he told them one detail that caught their attention. Just a few days before Joanna was killed, he had run into Christopher outside and mentioned that he was leaving town on Friday. So, Christopher knew Joanna would be alone and he had a key to her flat. He also had no solid alibi. He said he had been at home reading a book, but there was no one who could confirm that. Still, detectives didn't have a single real piece of evidence tying him to the murder. Even so, after speaking with Christopher, they felt there was something about him that made him seem genuinely capable of being involved. By that point, the media had already picked up on the fact that police were looking at the retired teacher, and the story spread quickly through the news. People were demanding action, and 5 days after Joanna's body was found, detectives made the decision to arrest Christopher. They hoped he would crack under questioning, and for hours they leaned on him, pushing him to confess. At the time, they searched his flat, but they found nothing useful. He didn't know an electronics like a phone or a computer. So, in the end, all they really took was his clothing and sent it to the lab. Even though Christopher refused to admit to anything, detectives then got another unexpected lead. After news of his arrest spread, one of Joanna's neighbors called police and shared something interesting. That night, he had seen Christopher's car pull out of the parking area outside the building and then sometime later come back. Because the neighbor's flat was on the ground, the headlights had shone right through his window. So he looked outside and was sure it was Christopher's car. According to him, he hadn't thought much of it at the time because he never imagined Christopher might be connected to Joanna's murder. But after the arrest, he decided to tell detectives what he had seen. To investigators, that became another piece of the puzzle. They started considering the possibility that Christopher had entered Joanna's flat shortly after she got home, attacked her, strangled her, then carried her body out to his car, which had been parked nearby. After that, he could have driven her out of the city, hidden her in the snow, and returned home as if nothing had happened. But that still wasn't the end of it. As we remember from the very beginning of the investigation, one of the theories going around Bristol was that Joanna might have been killed by a serial murderer. Detectives had looked into that possibility too, and found several unsolved cases that, at least in theory, could have been connected. One possible victim of that supposed serial killer was 25-year-old Melanie Hall, who vanished without a trace in 1996, as well as 20-year-old Glenys Cuthers, who had been strangled back in 1974. Nearly 40 years had passed since that earlier murder, but given Christopher's age, detectives believed he still could have been responsible for all of them. But no matter how hard they pushed him during the interviews, he kept insisting he was innocent. Under the law, police could only hold him without charges for 24 hours, and a judge could extend that by one more day. But even with 48 hours, detectives still couldn't get Christopher to confess, and formally charging him made no sense without evidence. So, they had no choice but to let him go. That decision triggered a huge public reaction. Many people were convinced he had pulled off the perfect murder and gotten away with it, and that now he could strike again at any moment. The biggest media outlets only made that panic worse, practically accusing Christopher of the murder outright. Journalists also camped outside his house and followed him wherever he went. Even though the public and the press were sure Christopher was involved, detectives still couldn't prove it. So they had to start looking at other possibilities, and that was when they came back to Joanna's next-door neighbor. As we remember, he was the one who called police and said he had seen the landlord's car around the time of the murder. But he had only remembered that detail after Christopher was arrested. Detectives began to wonder whether he had really just forgotten it, or whether he had been trying to send them in the wrong direction all along. This man was 32-year-old Vincent Tabuk. He worked as an architectural engineer and lived with his girlfriend in a ground-floor apartment that shared a wall with Joanna's flat. Vincent was one of the very first people police spoke to. He and his girlfriend came outside when officers first arrived and began searching Joanna's apartment. Later, Vincent told them that at the time of the murder, he had been sitting at home, and that later that night, he drove out to pick up his girlfriend from a Christmas work party. At that point, he didn't say a word about the landlord's car, even though police had specifically asked him to share absolutely anything he could remember about that evening. Now, though, he was claiming that he had looked out the window and seen Christopher's car, not once, but twice, a detail that very conveniently pointed the finger at the landlord. While detectives were working through that lead, Joanna's case had already become national news, and it was eventually featured on a popular true crime program. After that episode aired, police received a flood of new calls, but none of them brought any real progress. There was, however, one call that caught detectives' attention. A woman told them that Vincent might be the person behind Joanna's murder, though no further details about that tip are publicly known. Even so, for police, it was an important signal. By that point, they already had quiet suspicions about Vincent that the media knew nothing about. So, a tip from an outside caller sounded promising. At that point, Vincent was in the Netherlands with his girlfriend, where the two of them lived full-time. Detectives decided to send an officer there so he could personally take Vincent's statement about the landlord's car. But that wasn't the real reason police wanted to talk to him. After the interview, they told Vincent they were collecting DNA from everyone connected to the case and asked him to provide a sample. Vincent became visibly nervous, and at first he refused for quite a while. On top of that, he kept peppering the officer with questions. Where exactly had they found evidence? What kind of evidence was it? What were they planning to compare his sample to? And so on. In the end, though, he did hand over his DNA, and the officer brought it back to Bristol. At that point, police still didn't have the killer's DNA. Even so, Vincent's reaction was already telling them a lot. They started seriously considering the possibility that he was the murderer, but they still needed real evidence. Detectives understood that if Vincent really was responsible, getting a confession out of him without any hard evidence would be extremely difficult. He was highly intelligent, a specialist in a very narrow field of engineering and architecture. Vincent works on analyzing the movement of large groups of people in public spaces like airports, stadiums, schools, so those environments could be designed in the most efficient way possible. Because of those skills, he was in demand across Europe and regularly hired by major engineering firms. He lived in the Netherlands and had only come to Britain temporarily for one of those contracts. In January 2011, Vincent returned to Bristol, and just a few days later, detectives got a call from the lab. Experts had finished examining dozens of samples taken from Joanna's body and clothing. They found several traces of foreign DNA, but the samples were too small to determine exactly what had left them, whether they came from bodily fluids or simply from physical contact. Still, there was enough there to extract a DNA profile. The experts immediately compared it to the samples from the two main suspects, Christopher and Vincent, and finally got a match. Every one of those DNA traces belonged to one of them, Vincent. That gave detectives the confirmation they needed. Vincent had, at the very least, been in physical contact with Joanna shortly before her death in several different places, which meant he was with a very high degree of probability her killer. Based on where his DNA had been found, it looked as though he had carried Joanna's body, first holding her by the torso and then by the legs. As soon as the lab results came in, police arrested Vincent and brought him in for questioning, but he denied having anything to do with the murder. News of the new suspect immediately hit the media, though detectives chose not to reveal the evidence they had, at least for the time being, so they wouldn't risk damaging the investigation. Because of that, no one knew exactly why Vincent had been taken into custody. His friends and relatives refused to believe he could be involved in the murder. They thought police were simply trying to pin the case on him, the same way they had tried to do with Christopher. Even the landlord himself told reporters that he supported Vincent and believed he was innocent. What none of them knew, though, was what the DNA testing had shown. And before long, police uncovered even more evidence. When they examined Vincent's computer, they saw that from the moment of Joanna's disappearance, he had been obsessively tracking news articles about the case. That alone would not have been especially unusual, considering the murder had happened literally through the wall from his own flat. But Vincent wasn't just casually checking the news. He was spending entire days going through absolutely everything that was published about the case. Another clue came from his Google Maps history. Detectives found that Vincent had searched the very road where Joanna's body was eventually discovered and had looked at it in Street View. But guess what? He had done that 6 days before the body was found. They also found a large amount of violent adult material on his computer. And one detail in particular stood out. Detectives saw that Vincent had watched a video featuring a woman dressed almost exactly like Joanna, and she looked strikingly similar to the victim as well. And finally, police found illegal material involving minors on his computer, which by itself was enough to guarantee that he would be facing a separate prison sentence. But the most important piece of evidence was waiting for detectives in Vincent's car. Forensic experts found blood inside, and DNA testing showed that it belonged to Joanna. Even after that, Vincent kept insisting he was innocent and claimed he had an alibi. Up to that point, he had said he stayed home until late that night and then drove to pick up his girlfriend from her work party. Now, though, he claimed that around 10:30 that evening, he had gone to a supermarket, and he even showed detectives the receipt. Police reviewed the surveillance footage and did indeed see Vincent entering the store, but he walked through it and left without buying anything. Then, just a few minutes later, he went back in, bought groceries, and headed for the exit again. There, he stopped by the doors, pulled out his phone, and texted his girlfriend that he had gone to the supermarket. Detectives found his behavior strange, even staged. It looked as if Vincent had deliberately walked past the camera several times to make sure he was clearly seen on them. On top of that, for some reason, he texted his girlfriend about the supermarket visit, even though they hadn't been messaging all evening, and she was at her work party, and he sent that message while standing right under the main cameras by the entrance, almost as if he were creating an alibi for himself. Even so, there was still one important detail. He arrived at the supermarket about an hour and a half after Joanna died, which meant he still had plenty of time to drive her body out of the city and make it back. According to detectives, that evening may have unfolded like this. Joanna came home and stepped inside, but didn't lock the door right away. Instead, she went into the kitchen where she set down the 2 bottles of cider and most likely the pizza box. That was when Vincent must have entered the flat after seeing her return home. Based on the witness statements, Joanna may have screamed the moment she saw him. There was no evidence that Vincent and the victim actually knew each other. And all the time she had lived in that building, they had barely crossed paths. After that, he must have attacked and strangled her. Then he loaded Joanna's body into the trunk of his car and drove to the supermarket where he created an alibi for himself, using the receipt and the surveillance cameras. After that, he drove her out of the city, left her in a pile of snow, went back home, and a few hours later left again to pick up his girlfriend from the work party. For several weeks after his arrest, Vincent kept insisting he was innocent. He claimed police had faked the DNA results and were trying to pin someone else's crime on him. But then 3 weeks later, he suddenly changed his position. Vincent said he was ready to confess, but only to manslaughter. Detectives remembered that shortly before his arrest, he had searched online for the difference between murder and manslaughter. So to them, it looked like he had simply realized that with the evidence against him, he had no way out and was now trying to take the path that might get him the lightest sentence. According to Vincent's new version, he had never planned to kill Joanna, and everything happened by accident. He claimed he had gone out for a walk and saw her through the kitchen window. Supposedly, Joanna waved at him and invited him in. So Vincent entered the flat. They started talking, and he said it seemed to him that Joanna was flirting with him. So he leaned in to kiss her, but she jumped back and started screaming. Vincent panicked and in a rush tried to cover her mouth with his hands, but accidentally strangled her. Of course, that account sounded entirely fabricated and difficult to accept, but Vincent remained with it regardless. In May 2011, the court denied his plea to manslaughter, and he was scheduled to stand trial for murder. In October of that same year, the jury declared him guilty. Though the verdict was not unanimous, 2 of the 10 jurors genuinely believed he might be innocent. Even so, 8 votes were enough for a conviction, and Vincent was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years. A few years afterward, he faced another trial for possessing indecent images of minors, and in that case, he received an additional 10 months behind bars. It is also worth mentioning that there is no assurance Vincent will ever be freed after those 20 years. Based on everything surrounding the crime, detectives believe he could very well have become a serial killer if he had not been captured. So, the chances of him ever getting out remain relatively low. As for Christopher, Joanna's landlord, he also endured greatly because of the police and the media. After the actual killer was arrested, 8 major news outlets paid Christopher substantial compensation for essentially accusing him of the crime, and the police department issued him a formal apology. On June 14, 2019, about 7:30 p.m. inside the Costco Wholesale in Corona, California, the French family, including 32-year-old Kenneth French, his mother Paula French, and his father Russell French, were simply following their normal shopping routine. While browsing through the aisles, they encountered a food sample table serving sausages. At that same table was off-duty LAPD officer Salvador Sanchez. He was carrying his 8-month-old son Noah and appeared to be a devoted father engaging with his child. For reasons still unknown, Kenneth French abruptly assaulted Officer Sanchez. It remains unclear the precise nature of the attack, but it may be described as a shove, slap, punch, or another form of physical contact. This unforeseen act caused the officer to lose his footing and collapse onto the ground, dropping his baby and possibly striking his head during the incident. Upon reaching the scene, officers discovered Officer Sanchez visibly rattled and confused. Sanchez claimed he sustained a concussion from the fall, which left him confused and frightened. In this condition, he says he drew his gun, intending to defend himself and his young son Noah, whom he had dropped during the fall. He admitted to firing the gun, but maintained it was an accidental discharge due to his disoriented and scared state. The sound of gunfire sent shockwaves through the store. Panic erupted as people scattered in fear, some running for the exits to escape the danger. Others, with a sense of urgency, dialed 911 for help. During the chaos, while some took shelter, a few brave people went towards the sound of the shots to see if anyone was hurt. It was during this time when they found Officer Sanchez lying on the ground. Officer Sanchez also claimed that when he regained some awareness, he saw Kenneth holding a small black pistol similar to an LCP Ruger .380 pistol. The police arrived quickly after the shooting. Officer Sanchez told them he thought he'd been shot in the head and saw a gun before getting knocked down. One customer, who had been shopping elsewhere in the store, ran towards the commotion after the shots stopped. He saw Officer Sanchez pointing toward Kenneth French, who was also injured but found no gun near him. The police, too, were not able to find any witnesses who saw Kenneth, his mother, Paula, or his father, Russell, with a gun. They also couldn't find any evidence, like a dropped weapon, near where the family was shot to suggest they had one. Once everyone was safely evacuated from the store, the police took extra precautions to check everywhere for possible dangers. They even used special drone cameras to look on top of cabinets and freezers where someone might have hidden something. After a thorough investigation, it became clear there was only one gun involved in the entire incident: the handgun carried by LAPD officer Salvador Sanchez. No other weapon was ever found. Officer Sanchez didn't seem to have any outward injuries after the shooting, but he still asked to go to the hospital. There, he told the doctors he thought he passed out after hitting his head on the floor. Based on this, they diagnosed him with a concussion, which is a kind of brain injury that can cause dizziness and confusion. However, the police reports didn't say he had any clear injuries, like cuts or bruises, even later on. Convinced there was more to the story than met the eye, the detectives set their sights on uncovering the family's past. believing it held the key to a complete understanding. The French family, originally from Kolkata, India, had built a life in California. Kenneth, 32, lived with his parents, Russell and Paola, who had been married since 1986. They were a close-knit family who had lived in Canada and the UK before settling in Riverside. The couple raised their son, Kenneth, with a gentle soul and a warm smile. Kenneth, although 32 years old, had the mental capacity of a teenager due to a combination of schizophrenia and an intellectual disability. Schizophrenia is a complex mental illness that can affect a person's thoughts, emotions, and behavior. People with schizophrenia may experience hallucinations, which are seeing or hearing things that aren't there, and delusions, which are false beliefs held despite evidence to the contrary. It can be a challenging condition to manage, and Kenneth's family was dedicated to giving him the best possible care. But Kenneth's condition had been worsening over time, and he was nonverbal at the time of the incident. He had upcoming appointments to address recent concerns about fluid in his brain and the possible impact of stopping his medication due to other health issues. However, the circumstances surrounding the incident raised questions about whether Kenneth's situation could have played a role in the tragedy. To understand the full picture, it's crucial to hear from those closest to Kenneth, his parents. In the aftermath of the shooting, Kenneth's mother told responding officers that her son had hit the officer at the sample stand. However, she was understandably traumatized, and her account later changed, saying it was more of a slap. Meanwhile, Officer Sanchez wasn't arrested and went home while authorities investigated. He was initially given desk duty and then placed on paid leave. In light of the ongoing investigation, Officer Sanchez was given a desk assignment until further notice. Unfortunately, the store's security footage did little to shed light on the situation. The camera was far away and blocked by merchandise, so it didn't capture the initial interaction between Kenneth and the officer. It only showed Kenneth wearing a striped shirt, being pushed away from the stand by his father. Paola briefly appears gesturing towards the officer before moving away. The footage then shows the French family backing away just before the officer fired. Authorities released this footage as the only visual evidence they had from the store. They emphasized that there was no earlier footage available and no other cameras captured the incident. This was especially shocking for a crowded store like Costco, with people walking in various directions, browsing through aisles and stopping by sample stands. With only one camera in its limited view, large sections of the store remain unseen. While the footage provided a frustratingly limited window into the event, investigators weren't ready to give up just yet. Through careful analysis, they managed to get some valuable pieces of information from the grainy frames. They determined that a mere 3.8 seconds passed between Officer Sanchez falling to the ground and opening fire. This incredibly short time frame, barely enough time to blink, raises serious questions about what happened during those critical moments. As previously mentioned, Officer Sanchez fired a total of 10 shots during the chaotic encounter. 4 of them struck Kenneth, 3 bullets ripped through his back, and another pierced his shoulder. His parents, Paola and Russell, were also caught in the line of fire. Paola was wounded in the back, and Russell lost a kidney after being shot in the abdomen. The remaining 4 bullets lodged themselves in display cases, a grim reminder of the senseless violence that erupted in the familiar aisles of Costco. While no one else was physically harmed, the emotional toll was devastating. Russell and Paola spent months in the hospital, enduring surgeries and treatment for their injuries. But for Kenneth, there was no recovery. Witnesses recounted holding his hand, feeling the warmth fade as the 32-year-old man, a man with the mental capacity of a teenager, slipped away. His gentle smile, his struggles, his life, all silenced in a mere 3.8 seconds. The loss of Kenneth on June 14, 2019, a son, a brother, and a friend cast a deep shadow on his family and the community. His absence left behind a void filled with only the echo of unanswered questions and the weight of unimaginable grief. The French family spent 2 long months in the hospital recovering from their injuries. After being discharged in July 2019, they decided to speak up about their ordeal. They hoped that by sharing their story, they could convince the Riverside County District Attorney's Office to file charges against Officer Sanchez, facing public pressure and the family's pleas. The District Attorney's Office presented the case to a grand jury in September 2019. However, the jury ultimately decided not to charge Officer Sanchez. This decision was another crushing blow for the French family. Just 1 week after leaving the hospital and finally holding a funeral service for Kenneth, They were forced to confront this new reality. Still deeply grieving and emotionally drained, they held a press conference to express their disappointment. They believed the city of Los Angeles, where Officer Sanchez worked, shared the blame for their tragedy. Their lawsuit argued that the city had been negligent in its duty to ensure proper training for its officers. Meanwhile, Officer Sanchez's attorneys were fighting back against the charges. The attorneys maintained that the officer had acted appropriately. The legal battle didn't end there. While the local district attorney's office decided not to pursue charges, the state stepped in. In August 2021, almost 2 years after the incident, the California Attorney General's office decided to press charges against Officer Sanchez. They accused him of 1 count of manslaughter, which means causing someone's death unintentionally, along with other charges related to using a gun dangerously. If found guilty, he could face up to 30 years in prison. Although it had been 2 years since the shooting, the public, especially the neighbors, were still waiting for justice to be served. Officer Sanchez's lawyer argued against these charges, claiming they were politically motivated. Despite the earlier setback, the French family's fight for justice continued in the civil trial. This time, they were able to introduce a powerful new piece of evidence. This animated recreation filled in the crucial missing pieces that the grainy store security footage had failed to capture. The animation brought the events of that tragic day to life. It depicted the French family, Paola and Russell, strolling through the aisles. Kenneth, wearing a striped shirt and jeans, walked beside them, seemingly unaware of the encounter. As they approached the sample stand, the animation showed Kenneth reaching out and striking the officer who was holding his young son. The impact sent the officer tumbling to the ground. The animation then depicted the horrifying moment when all 3 family members were struck by the officer's gunfire. During November 2021, a jury in Los Angeles ruled in favor of the French family. The court proceedings surrounding the Costco shooting carried on for years. On December 27, 2023, a trial took place at Larson Justice Center in Indio to decide whether former Officer Sanchez was criminally liable for the shooting. The jury deliberated for about 3 weeks, but eventually deadlocked, unable to reach a verdict. The judge declared a mistrial. This heartbreaking case portrays a picture of tragedy on all sides. Kenneth French, a kind soul with a mental disability, lost his life in a needless act of violence. On the opposite side of the gun, a father and police officer, Salvador Sanchez, acted in what he believed was essential to protect himself and his young son. His conduct that day has undoubtedly haunted him and his family, leaving a mark on his career and reputation. This case leaves us with many unresolved questions and an overwhelming sense of unease. It sparks debates about police training, mental health awareness, and the boundaries of self-defense. What do you think about this case? Did the outcome bring justice? Was compassion considered? Should Officer Sanchez have been held accountable?